All right, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us. We're going to dig into a question today. Is it time to launch a managed SaaS security service? Let's jump right in, right? We're going to go over some risks in the SaaS world, about where some of the current messaging or some of the current services might be falling short, and then talk about why and how to do this. I'm joined with two amazing experts here, Jerome Smith and Matt Topper. And I'm Jim Peterson, our Principal Solution Advisor and Cybersecurity PMM at ConnectWise. Jerome, how about you jump in and introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Jerome Smith, VP Security Operations. For ConnectWise, I am responsible for the SOC, the service delivery of our managed solutions, as well as solution design for existing and new solutions.
All right, Matt, that leaves you, man.
All right, Matt Topper, cybersecurity evangelist on the IT Nation team at ConnectWise. Biggest thing for me is I am the internal event donor of the IT Nation Secure Conference that you saw in the video before. So that's what I'm focused on right now, in addition to just general security education and things like that.
That's awesome. Now we're really excited about talk about this topic because we see obviously SaaS is growing continuously for a lot of MSP clients. And we're wondering, we want to talk through how we're securing those environments to get the most protection. And then on the same note, how are we maintaining margins on our traditional cybersecurity and our services side? I think we're going to kick off with some threats today. So Jerome, take us away.
Yeah, absolutely. So threats, right? So over time, we've seen a lot of evolution in how threat actors are attacking organizations and individuals, right? So generally, the really the go-to for attacks, attacking people, right? Because that's the easiest. Mostly around social engineering, and along with that, of course, the follow-on for password attacks like phishing and items like that. It's so easy to attack the human side of of assets, right? So it's easier to fish somebody versus perform a exploit of hardware, software, things like that, right? People are easy. So that's here. That'll never go away, right? That's also a key part of the SaaS attacks as well. Some of the other side of the traditional attacks are the attacking systems. So like it says on this, firmware attacks, software vulnerabilities, 0 days, supply chain attacks, which is pretty scary, rootkits, and denial of services. So all of these items, and a lot of these can happen on the SaaS side too. But the way that you protect them is a little bit different in approach. So from the SaaS side, we're seeing primarily account takeovers, right? And these are, you're going to, initial entry is going to happen the same way that it happened for, the traditional sense, right? Somebody got phished, somebody put their creds in, maybe MFA is not enabled, things like that. So platform vulnerabilities is another. It's actually not as nearly as common, right, as account takeovers based on, social engineering. And then, of course, shared responsibility. So there is an issue around shared responsibility. The gap usually it involves in, not the fact that the vendor is securing the infrastructure, but who secures the data and the client's data, managing permissions, auditing configurations, and services around or things around there. So there's a huge challenge in that. But the threats that we see from the SaaS side are continuing to grow, and because SaaS is such a big part of how nearly everyone's doing business, it's really a growing need.
Yeah, it's really challenging when I think about this, both you guys, right? If I think of even a few years ago, we were so focused on protecting the perimeter, building the wall, keeping people out. Now we have all these insider risks that have always been there, but we think about them more in a SaaS world because we can disseminate information so quickly. And, a lot of the shared responsibility, if I think of, just things like conditional access policies and just the basic fundamentals, MSPs have to spend time on this stuff for their clients, or we have vulnerabilities. And it's just trying to figure out how do we do it right, stay profitable, and make sure we're not, leaving our clients vulnerable. I'm sure you guys both see that on a continual basis.
I think you touched on one of the most significant differences in what you would describe as the new modern SaaS world, both of you actually in different ways. Jim, you said the magic phrase, right? In olden days, there was the perimeter we're securing. Now they're not only has it shifted, there essentially is no perimeter. You could be at a coffee shop, at your house, at the airport, wherever, connecting to SaaS applications, and you're maybe behind a firewall that the venue might have. Maybe there's something on your device, but really there's nothing. And Jerome, to your point about shared responsibility, that's something that gets overlooked all the time, right? It's SaaS. The software vendor, the SaaS provider, doesn't force you to configure things properly, right? Like use a strong password or not leave remote desktop open if you have a virtual machine up in Azure, for example. It's a really different way of thinking from this previous castle and moat paradigm we used to have.
Yeah, that kind of leads us into some gaps that we know about in the SaaS cybersecurity space. And Matt, you were touching on a few of them. I'm sure you're going to take us through the rest of this.
Yeah, I'm happy to. So some of the common SaaS cybersecurity gaps, like you can see on the slide, are alerting. So if you have data all over the place, different SaaS providers, different line of business applications, different infrastructure providers, you might have alerts coming in from all different places, right? Hopefully they're configured properly. Did your email address change? Did your alerting mechanism change? Did the phone number you're using change? Right? There's different ways for data to come in, and thinking about how you're going to receive those alerts and that the alerting even exists or what to look for is a huge challenge in SaaS applications, right? Kind of this dispersion of data all over the place and trying to figure out how to deal with it and where does it live. The protection pillar, I mean, we can go forever there, right? There's numerous ways. Every new line of business provider, every new SaaS provider that you introduces new risks. So you have some examples there: MFA, conditional access, data loss protection, and backups. You now not only have to deal with that for your internal infrastructure, right, your old school servers and racks and things, but also might now have critical business data in some line of business application that's a hosted version, right? How do I back that up? If they go down, what's my business continuity plan look like? If somebody leaves my company, how do I ensure that access is revoked quickly? Right? The landscape has changed significantly with this shift to SaaS everything. Then reporting, well, that goes into what we were starting to say before, right? You have not only your report of who's been using what, is the configuration up to date, has there been drift from your standards, but also just where is all of your stuff? Very easy for some well-meaning employee to all of a sudden have corporate data on a line of business app that isn't sanctioned, that you don't know about. And without opening the Pandora's box, right? A perfect example of that is the recent proliferation of AI apps. You could have corporate data in some GPT LLM that doesn't have the company guardrails around it. Next thing you know, a threat actor comes in and accidentally or intentionally gets some data about your upcoming marketing plan because you used it to rewrite a announcement or press release. So it really changed how we look at protection and reporting. I know I went a little bit off the direct threat, Jim, but I think that's all relevant.
No, I think it's a great conversation because we do want to show those threats through reporting and help people understand the gaps they have. But we also want to show the progress that we made. When we think of that journey that people are on, if we look back even a few years ago, the changes we've had to make specifically in things like Microsoft 365, we want to be able to show that, hey, we've been doing good here over the last 3 years or 4 years or whatever time frame. We've improved your environment, but we still have room to grow.
Yeah, and filling the gaps isn't always it's not always a simple solution. Buy something and now you're getting alerting based on as soon as configuration unauthorized configuration changes made, boom, you got an alert, right? Protections to prevent additional changes or even reporting. That's not as easy as it seems, because sure, you might have a solution that fits for Microsoft. You might have a solution that fits for your Salesforce or SAP instances. But what about those other ones? Like, hey, your solution also do Dropbox? Can it do others? And as far as I'm aware, there's not a lot of solutions that fit them all, right? And so that does mean that there's some time and care that needs to be put in place to addressing these gaps. It's not there's from what I'm aware of, there is no one solution fits all. but through things like automation and others, you can fill these gaps. It's just something, and it's a high value as well, extremely high value. If you can do this for your clients, then you can absolutely, one, it's protecting them and it's providing value, as a solution. But also you're going to get the additional value of these things that don't exist now, that can exist, will take you from a reactionary to more of a proactive, right? You can feel that you've taken a more proactive stance because you have protections in place and have filled some of these gaps.
Yeah, that's a really great point. We could probably dig on this slide the whole time because we could start talking about, hey, this was like the physical environment before things like SIM came out, where you had to independently configure everything to alert you, and you got this fatigue and challenges. So, which I'm sure, Jerome, you'd love to talk about SIM for a few hours, but we'll keep it moving here. So, so if we think about this, like why should we make a change? Why should we consider like launching a specific SaaS service? And many of you have seen this curve jumping conversation before, but anything that we do, and really the IT industry and probably any industry, has this kind of growth curve, right? Growing plateau, decline, and tank. And what we want to do is get to the next thing before we really hit that decline phase, because it's hard to stay profitable. It's hard to keep growing. It's hard to maintain staff. If we think back to the break fix days, like, we said, hey, managed services is coming. Let's jump there. Let's take off the plateau and get to the growth side of managed services so that we can be on that fun run, right, of growth and profits and all that good stuff. When we think about kind of the holistic journey that MSPs have taken, right? We went from break fix to managed support, which we just talked about. Then we launched managed security, managed backup, and a few other things because we had to continually specialize so that we could show value and also, right, make sure the profits were there. Managed SaaS security is really a natural next jump in this progress. We don't know what's next. It's probably going to be something, right? Well, we know it's going to be something. We just don't know what it is yet. But the more specialized we can get, the more value we can provide, because when we can assign tools and time and cost to it, we can make sure we're profitable and doing the work. One of the challenges with security is, like, how big does that bundle get before we start saying, hey, this might need to be 2 or 3 things?
Yeah, and I think this is a reflection of the reality. It for quite a while, SaaS was maybe an optional thing. Some clients were on it, some line of business apps were the hosted version. Now it seems like it's really an exception if you're doing anything on-prem and a really specialized use case. So as the industry and as technology has changed to favor hosted applications and cloud services, our offerings need to change to reflect this is what our clients are using day to day, right? It's not just a matter of having your endpoint protection and having your firewall. Their data is in the cloud, and it's up to us to be able to protect it appropriately.
Yeah. And all those things are still, so what we've done in the past, right, for endpoint protection, firewalls, in-house applications, those are still really important and require protection, right? And it's more of thinking of it as a growth in responsibilities and capabilities, right? So, let's say, era of 2015, right? You had a complete stack whenever you were providing, professional services around, or you're doing professional services automation through, like RMM tools, like, like Automate, like ConnectWise Automate, or what was LabTech, right? LabTech back in the day, right? You were starting to do some of that stuff. You were leading, right? You were leading remote monitoring and management tools. So at this point, people are definitely moving away from individual monitoring of devices outside of a centralized platform. Email filtering came into prominence, right? For the spam filtering, kind of sucked. It has gotten better, right? It's gotten better. It's always a challenge because threat actors are advancing. And then antivirus, right? That was one of those go-tos, along with on-prem data protection. Your backup and disaster recovery type tools, right? Then give it a couple more years, say around 2020, we start to add some additionals, right? So, for instance, the endpoint protection started to advance, right? The security awareness training got better, right? Because it was more tuned to what's happening now. The SIM style, so that's the security information event management, right? where we can take a look in just all the logs and analyze what's happening to identify trends, early detections, things like that. You started to see a lot of cloud application data protection. So, hey, how are we doing backups for M365 and Google? Right, those really started to dig in. We started to see the beginning of those, like actually uh, manifest in a way that MSPs and service providers were able to, add into their set. And of course, things didn't go away, right? We continued to advance from a, services automation standpoint. RMMs got better, and backups got better, right? Where we moved to more, there's a lot more instances of, backups going from on-site to being in the cloud, which is extremely critical and related, right? Cloud backups are a SaaS solution. You need to make sure that you're protecting those effectively. Now let's go to the now, right? So we already have all those things. We've added additionals. You see that vulnerability management is a lot easier to do now, right? It's built into a ton of the tools, and it's much more, but it's key, right? Should have been key back in the day, but it's key in, it's not an easy win, but it's a win relative to, right? We also have connection security. So this was a big one coming in, revolving around zero trust type models and SaaS, right? These were basically taking the best of what you can do in the cloud, the best of what you could do on-prem, and kind of standardizing around a hybrid model that allowed you to unify, connectivity and access management. There are a lot of companies that do it, so it's sometimes kind of hard to pick around, right? What's best, but still kind of traditional hybrid style, not specifically SaaS stuff yet, right? But now, because of especially after Corona, the change where everyone shifted to remote work, SaaS applications became cheaper than hosting your own server, right? That's where things that you were doing before, like you were doing configuration management in your own environments, in your self-hosted environments. It's done differently in a SaaS environment, right? Monitoring, alerting, reporting, and data protection, right? Those are the keys now. So, if you take things around, how critical is configuration management? Well, that's twofold. Take it from a security aspect of configuration management. And yes, want to make sure you're watching for configuration drift and things like that. But, MSP and service providers, they're managing more than just their own instances, right? So configuration management takes on a whole different, face whenever you're like, hey, I want to apply these best practices across all of these tenants. And that's where some additional value comes, especially as a service provider, right? Because that's something that is specific to a use case for you, unless you're a large enterprise that has, 10 Microsoft, instances that you're managing, right? In that case, yeah, you'd want to do that. But generally, MSPs and service providers are really, in need for those types of solutions. And it's critical for for them to provide effective service.
Jerome, it's interesting when I kind of hear you talking about these technologies. I look back at 2015 and I say, well, hey, we're kind of reactive there, right? We're stopping things after they've been an issue, spam, antivirus, all these things. So we kind of move to a little bit more proactive. We get the EDR solutions, we filter out more, we do more training. And we get to that 2025, we're really saying, hey, let's do managed proactive solutions. And how do we start breaking this out? There's just gets to be so much. I think complete was probably an expansive term, because I think a lot of people are looking at this stack saying that's about 2/3 of what I do. So complete may be a little different depending on industry, compliance, and a lot of things. But we're going a long way, and it's going to be interesting to see where we're going with all this.
Yeah. So that's another thing, right? So in 2015ish, right? And you feel that, right? There was this feel of, hey, I'm gonna try not to get hit, right? I'm trying not to get ransomware. I'm trying not to be under attack. I'm gonna just protections. 2025, in the last couple of years as well, it's not I'm trying not to get hit. It's you will get hit, right? It's only a matter of time. You will come under attack. There will be, indicators that somebody's trying to pull one over on you, right? Whether through social engineering, phishing, or through actual account takeovers. You cannot be reactive. You have to be reactive for those, but you have to prepare ahead of time in order to prevent it. Otherwise, you're just, at that point, you're not doing yourself or your clients, a service in that case.
I can't believe looking at this that 2015 is considered the Stone Age now. That's the most notable thing on this graph.
That's the world that I live in now. What
Man,
okay is not okay anymore.
I just want to highlight one thing you said, Jerome, and that's SASE, because just because we talked about you might be in a hotel coffee shop thing before. That's one of the huge use cases for that, right? As your company's CISO or sysadmin or security person, you feel a little bit better about your users being on a hostile network like a hotel, like their own houses, for example. You talk about a hostile network. SASE, you can think of it almost like it's not an exact equivalent, but it's almost like an always-on VPN connection for accessing websites and things that are hosted back at your own location. So just take a look at that as far as being something that can mitigate against some of those hostile networks, some of those open Wi-Fi networks. You don't have to train your users as much to be quite as scared or have to differentiate between safe and unsafe networks. Now, it doesn't make every network safe, but it's certainly a big step in the right direction for being on these kind of unknown public Wi-Fi networks, in addition to all the other things SASE can do.
Yeah, that's the key. There's no just unconditional access. It's access based on the rules that you set forth, right? So as long as you're doing a good job managing those rules and, ensuring that, you tune over time, that's what's key in all of this, right? A lot of this is make sure you're tuning over time. Then absolutely, like that's one of the, I would say, a critical part of your service offerings is a SASE type solution that you can make available.
Yeah, for sure. And that kind of leads us to that whole stat conversation. Matt, I know that you were talking a little bit about this, like the differences between them. Maybe you can walk us through like what we're seeing here.
Yeah. So Jerome touched on some of the things that you usually have on the on-prem stack, right? The endpoint protection, the email protection, the connectivity protection, none of that goes away in your SaaS environment, in your cloud-hosted environments, right? You still have vuln management, threat hunting, event alerting, all the things listed there, right? Physical security. What changes is in the SaaS world, you don't necessarily have access to all of this, right? Say you started a company right this minute. You'd probably be all SaaS, right? Most newer companies are Microsoft 365 or Google or one of those for email, in addition to a number of line of business cloud applications. And if you're like that, you don't have a data center to secure. You don't have a server to put a lock around or a firewall to install where your ISP is coming in. Most likely you have employees working from their houses or co-working spaces or coffee shops like we just talked about. And you are looking at how do I figure out what they're doing or what's happening on these various line of business applications. That's where things like managed SaaS defense and response comes in, right? So not just looking for what the endpoint is doing, looking at what your employees are doing with the cloud services, right? You get into this idea of trying to maintain control of corporate data. That's the ultimate goal of a lot of this. And your corporate data is out in some SaaS provider, is out in some third-party data storage facility, some hosted infrastructure provider. These are tools that allow you to figure out what's happening with it, how my users are using these services, and ultimately maintain that control. Same thing with SaaS security management and security reporting. It's not just trying to figure out what they're doing or what's not good. Keeping control and from an inventory perspective, just where is everything? There are so many websites out there, so many hosted providers, so many different services out there that trying to get a handle on where are my employees sending my critical sensitive corporate data. That understanding is huge, right? So most companies, though, didn't start yesterday. They still have some combination of this. They still have a data center somewhere. They might have an office that some people go into combined with some remote workers. So you kind of need all of this in the bigger picture. And that's where this idea of a hybrid infrastructure, hybrid security infrastructure comes in. Unless you just started, or unless you for somehow have zero cloud services, you're kind of in this big box of you need components of both because you have data in both local and cloud services.
Yeah, and that definitely leads to the challenge, right, that we're talking about here. When we think about an MSP providing to an SMB, they're going to have all kinds of different mixes of these solutions. Again, some are going to always be there, right? Endpoint protection, security awareness training, email filtering, kind of the basics, right? We need across the board. But picking and choosing the right solution based on that client gets to be this mix of a stack that they can be challenged with. And if we look at like what could be done, right? And we'll get pushback on this for sure, because a lot of times we'll hear, well, if I start breaking up all my services, I'm going to nickel and dime, they're going to feel like we're trying to overcharge. But we also have to understand that they're changing the way they're doing business also. They're getting more SaaS-based applications. They're changing their world. And we're just trying to make sure we align with it. So if we look at traditional managed support, which used to be the only thing we sold, right? And we started breaking things out. If we looked at security, SaaS security, data protection, and for those really specific environments, how do we help them with compliance? And Jerome quick jumped on this as soon as we started talking about it earlier and say, hey guys, let's be careful when we talk about managed compliance because it's bigger than that. We're just saying that there's tools that can be align with helping with a compliance issue or a compliance-based company. So just thinking about it like this, hey, if we had 5 SKUs we sold to a customer, does that feel like a lot? Maybe, but does it show the true value that an MSP is providing? And I would say yes, 100%.
Yeah. And, I had the privilege of being able to talk with, it feels like an endless amount of MSPs and service providers, right? But, it's, I talk to probably 50 different partners a month, specifically. A lot of times the conversation goes around, hey, how on earth should I package these things? And in a lot of cases, right, it depends. That's the general, security, go-to answer there. And it really depends on how you're positioning these to your clients, whether or not, hey, is there a SaaS package, right? There should be elements, if you haven't already, there should be elements of SaaS protection that you can charge for, right? However you package it is, depends on your business model. Generally, with the partners that I've worked with, what I'm hearing is that they do things in kind of 3 major ways, right? They either offer like this per user, per endpoint based pricing, and they may have some a la cartes, right? That's pretty common. Others do this good, better, best. And then I have others, and it seems like it's a smaller subset of partners that I talk with, that because it's hard to manage that everything's a la carte, right? You choose whether you want your endpoints managed, whether you want security awareness training, whether you want like, EDR versus, antivirus, right? And those get, some of those are more challenging than others, right? Some of those models, but having an element of SaaS security, because this is something that you should be doing for your clients anyway, right? You shouldn't do it for free necessarily. You should be able to figure out how best to build this into your offerings, but you're going to have to do it, because here's the funny thing, right? If you aren't doing it, somebody else is offering it. And what's happening is they're not going to somebody and say, I just want you to do, provide security around managed SaaS, right? Or I want you to help secure my SaaS environments. No, they're going to say, okay, they have this offering and my current, MSP or service provider doesn't. I'm going to see what I can do to make sure I got one throat to choke, that it's like, a unified service that I'm getting. And there's a lot of potential for risk there if you're not moving along with it. And when we see that with outside of the SaaS side of the house, right? We see that for partners that have been a little hesitant to get into the managed security side of the house. Doesn't mean you're standing up an MSSP, right? It means that I see Sean posted in the LinkedIn chat. Yes, you should increase the cost based on the services that you're providing, right? You're providing value to your clients. And in the element of protection, right, there's some risk that you're taking on as well, right? Because, when something inevitably happens, regardless of what kind of protection that you can provide, you're going to try your best to prevent it. when it inevitably happens and something slips through, your clients are not going to blame themselves. They're going to blame you, right? So yes, please do charge for services you provide. And this next slide. So it's not a question of if you're going to get hit, it's a question of when, right? There's a ton of different sources that you can look at for this data, but they all tell the same story. So in this case, this Microsoft Digital Defense Report, right? 7,000 password attacks per second. They're seeing 78 trillion security signals per day. Those are events that are related to potential security. They're like logs, things like that they're seeing. 775 million emails containing malware, right, in a year. So, and that's the key area where they're getting in. Someone is trying, and it's not even the fact that it's it's a human typing on a keyboard. This stuff's automated. You're on a list, right? Your clients are on a list. And if you're not doing the basics, you're going to be in the news potentially, right? Very, very important that you take this stuff seriously. Just because you haven't been hit or your clients haven't been hit doesn't mean you won't be. It's just literally a matter of when. So it's dangerous.
And it's interesting. You look at that 775 million. That's just what Microsoft saw. Now, Microsoft is the majority email provider for a lot of businesses, but a lot of times it's front-ended with a different solution, Proofpoint or a different one. So it's just what they're seeing come in. So we know that number is enormous. And 775 million doesn't sound like a lot when you compare it to 78 trillion. But, if you're one that got one that came in, it's plenty. So
Sounds like a lot to me.
Yeah.
Love it. Yeah, Matt, I think you're going to talk a little bit more about how this really helps.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing to take away from this for an MSP and how your benefit you're getting from it is referencing back to something we said before. Clients are going to start putting things in SaaS solutions, whether you helped them get it there or whether a rogue employee at a client put it there intentionally or accidentally. Clients' data lives in SaaS providers now. And you as the MSP, the reality is that you need to be tailoring your security offerings to account for that. In addition to it just being the right thing to do for security wise, like we were just talking about, there's an opportunity to increase revenue here. And of course, there's a conversation around contract renewals and margins and are these add-ons and things like that to have. But it's a new way to think about, I can get some more revenue for things that I need to be providing anyway. And for your clients, they can have some confidence, and these guys get it. They get that we're moving to a modern workplace environment. They get that we're starting to have our data all over the place and helping us control that, not just responding to, I can't log in, but proactively helping us say, hey, this is the way the world is going, the industry is going. Let's get in front of this and make sure that you're protected wherever you are, right? And draw the little castle and moat that we just talked about, explain that that's gone, and explain you're now protected everywhere. So the big thing for the MSP is you're able to secure your clients, you're able to instill confidence, you're able to make sure that they don't get compromised, and perhaps most importantly, you're able to still be profitable while doing it, going down this road.
Yeah, that's key. You shouldn't lose your shirt providing these services, right? Yes, there will be additional costs for tools that you may need. You may have additional maybe development, cost around, adding additional automation, that you may need to put in, right? But you should charge for those, right? Because if you're including them in like a good, better, best type scenario, make sure you're building that cost in there, right? Addressing it with your clients as you need to and let them know. And the messaging needs to be that, of course, almost everybody's hybrid right now anyway, right? They have on-prem, resources, or they have, and they have SaaS. But as time goes on and, costs continue to be it's more feasible to just by default have things in a SaaS solution as, these old applications age out. it will be a SaaS play, right? So if you were charging per server for, maintaining and supporting a solution, that's not a something you're going to be able to charge for in the same manner anymore, right? You're going to have to move over to not just protecting SaaS but managing SaaS as well. Protection being the key, though, to making sure that you are keeping the moats full and the castle doors are shut, right? So the threat actors can't come in. And it is a challenge. It's not easy. It's not flip of a switch type deal, right? So there is some thought that has to go into developing a solution like that. I think that kind of leads into the next slide too, potentially.
No, yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, and you see comments from John and Neil and Sean kind of supporting all this. Like, yeah, it's time. Let's do this, right? So hopefully we've kind of talked about why this is important. And again, whether you do a specific managed SaaS security service or you build it into something else, it's really making sure that we're being compensated for it. When we're going to push back, we're going to say, hey, let's make sure there's 65% margin in everything we do. It ensures a great service department gross profit and typically a pretty good net profit. So if we can carve this out and say, well, what does it take from a tool perspective? What does it take from a time perspective? We can do that math and figure out what it takes to, just like you said, Jerome, say, well, if I'm not configuring a server, if I'm configuring a solution, how do I ensure to make money? Now, we're going to go through this pretty quickly. We got an ebook coming up, and I got a material piece that you can download here in just a second. But launching the service, sometimes we just say, let's put a tool set together and let's go. But if we really get to the point of defining that scope, what platforms are we going to support? Is it going to be Microsoft 365 and Google and something else? How are we going to secure? What are we going to do? The tools and the things we're going to solve. Are we going to do configuration reporting? We're going to help with data loss prevention. Creating that price strategy, just like we talked about, 65% margin. I'll say that 100 times to everybody if you want to hear it, because that really helps ensure profitability all the way through. Training our internal teams. We're typically not great at this from an MSP perspective. As an owner, I'm an ex-owner, right? And Neil's on here, so he might know. I get an idea, I'm going to start selling it tomorrow. If we don't train the teams first, right, to be able to know how to deliver this properly and how to talk about it, we can kind of fall on our face a little bit. And then communicate that launch, make a big deal about it, make sure people understand why this is important and your value in bringing the solution to them. Yes, there's a price with it, but you're solving a gap that they don't have or that they have today, and you're helping them out. If we look at, we do have a launching a managed SaaS security checklist, QR code. If you're not into QR codes, I totally get it. I will be posting that as a link in the after show here so that you'll be able to download it from ConnectWise. But at the end of the day, we're going to walk you through those 5 steps. Oh, there we go. We got it in the chat.
Like magic, right?
Like magic. We have an amazing
that.
person behind us with Jess. So thank you, Jess. But at the end of the day, you can walk through this and it's going to help you. And at the same time, if you struggle with this at all, we're here to help, right? ConnectWise is here to help you launch this service, find the right solutions, and make sure you're providing support to your clients. And that leads us to the end. Guys, thank you so much. I would ask, and you guys, this is kind of a spur of the moment thing, any last minute tips of advice you want to leave on this topic?
Well, one, don't forget the basics, right? If you are still you're standing up that SaaS service, don't forget the basics. Don't leave the others behind. Make sure that you're doing vulnerability management, you're patching your gear, especially firewalls and publicly accessible endpoints like VPN concentrators, MFA, all the things. And if there's a device in your environment that can be protected with endpoint protection, install it. Keep it configured. Manage exclusions. I tell partners this any chance I get, so I'm not going to leave this opportunity, unfilled here. So don't forget the basics.
Perfect.
And I would add to that, don't forget about step 0 almost, which is know what you have, know where your data is, understand what cloud services, what internal services, just understand from an asset inventory perspective, where is everything? There's no accident that every compliance framework you look at, one of the first things is, do you know where your data is? And having that tells you what you need to secure in the first place. So just always remember that one of the ultimate goals of this is to understand where it is and keep control of it. And all of the things that we're talking about today are ways to do that.
That's perfect. My last thought is whenever we're looking at a competitive advantage, we want to bring things that are different. We want to bring things that help people solve problems. And this is one way to really show that you're providing a difference in your client's world. So I'll stop there. Oh, and 65% service margin. Let's go for that as well. So, other than that, well, hey, everybody, thank you very much for joining. We really appreciate it. We'll look forward to the next one. And until next time, thank you. Thank you very much.